Hello, everyone. My name is Ben Williams. I'm a Texas broker in El Paso, Texas. I lead a team called the War Team, and we're going to break down paragraphs 5, 6, 7, and 12 of the 1 to 4 family contract. We got some people in person. We got one person in here. We have Debbie, and we have another person en route, and we got about a few people online, but we got the right people here. All right. Let's get this thing started. Hope you guys can see my screen, and we are going to jump into this. Okay. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
There we go. All right. Let's go to paragraph 5. Paragraph 5 is the earnest money and termination. The first thing it has up there, delivery of earnest money and option fee within 3 days after the effective date. And that's just straight 3 days, right? Buyer must deliver to, and it has a thing that says escrow agent. Escrow agent in the world that we live is the title company. I know that it does put the actual title company or the escrow officer's name in jointly. I don't really like that, but we roll with it. The agent itself is the actual title company. All right. But anyway, we're fine. Just going to put the person's name in it. All right. And this says at the address, whatever that address is. And then it has a $sign there and it says blank as earnest money. So that's where we put in the earnest money, how much the earnest money is going to be up there. It goes on to say, it says blank as option fee. So an example, we would do this. It would have, let's just say the earnest money is $2,000, right? 200, 20,000. And option fee being, let's say 200 bucks, right? So just play with me for a second. Here you have a sum address. It says 123 Smith Street, right? Be there. And then here it would have Debbie. All right. So something like that, right? Now it says the earnest money and option money shall be payable to the escrow agent and may be paid separately or combined as a single payment. And it goes back to what I was saying. It says escrow agent. So you would not pay Debbie Pierre. So that's what I always say. I like to have the title company in there. However, jointly does put the title officer, not the title company. I don't like that, but we're going to roll with it because down here at the bottom, it does have another thing that says title company. So we're going to be okay. I think we'll be fine in the way of the world, right? So we'll be okay. It seems to be formally accepted too as we go around the world here. All right. You had a question?
Can't we just make it to where we just put title company?
I'd like to.
Okay.
I'd like to put Debbie slash whatever title company. If it was really the way it was, if I was king for the day, it would probably have.
It's because I've been told, let's say Debbie gets fired or quits or whatever.
And then we have an issue to
Yeah.
title. That's where I've always been taught, but it's automatically populating that way. And we're trying to get it changed. All right. But anyway, we're diving in there, right? It says it can be payable together or separately to the escrow agent. Now it says one says buyer shall deliver additional earnest money. You're only going to use this if there's some additional earnest money, which most times when you do a contract, it's not really happening at that time. Sometimes investors, they will ask you to use one, and it would say they'll put the earnest money in 10 or 15 days so they can have their option period and go through everything to see if they're really going to buy the house. That's just a way investors do it. But typically most traditional sales have it in 3 days. I recommend to have it in 3 days. Put your money where your mouth is as a buyer and make sure your buyers put the money up to say that they're serious about buying. But there's ways to do that, right? Now, 2 is really critical on this. If the last day to deliver the earnest money or option fee or the additional earnest money falls on a Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday, the time to deliver the earnest money and option fee or additional earnest money is applicable, is extended until the next day that is not a Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday. All right. So that's really critical when you start to calculate. Everything's 3 days. There's no business days here. It's 3 days straight. And they're saying, hey, if it does, the third day does end on a Saturday, Sunday, or holiday, then the earnest money, option money is due on the next day that is not a Saturday, Sunday, or holiday. So make sure you calculate, make sure you look at the days. whatever the effective date is, and the effective date is the date of execution. The date of execution is day 0. The next day is day 1. The next day after that, day 2. The next day after that is day 3. If day 3 lands on a Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday, then provision number 2 would go in place. Any questions about that one before we go forward? Because a lot of times people ask me these questions, and I want to open it up for any questions. None. All right.
How about like this year? Veterans Day is on a Tuesday.
Okay.
When you say legal holidays.
I would associate this as a legal holiday being the day that title company is not open. So if we have this title company, you find out on the 3rd day that title company is not open for whatever reason, I believe that would satisfy this requirement. Okay. Okay. It says 3, the amounts escrow agents receives under the paragraph shall be applied first to the option fee, then to the earnest money, and then the additional earnest money. Simply put, in this category. So let's say your client only wired $2,000 to True Title. The first portion of that $2,000 is going to be applied towards the option fee, right? So meaning that $200 of the $2,000 would go towards the option fee, and there would be only $1,800 on the earnest money, meaning that the earnest money is short. And if the earnest money is short, that means the seller could terminate the contract based on the fact that the buyer did not turn in all of the earnest money. So keep that in mind. Remember, all money goes in. If it goes in there, the money's going to the option fee first. Any questions about that one on number 3? Okay.
Even on the same money order option.
It can be on the same. Yep. So it reads right there. It says here, the earnest money and option money shall be made payable to escrow agent. It may be paid separately or combined. Okay. All right. Good question. We're going on to number 4. It says, hey, look, buyer authorized escrow agent, the title company, to release and deliver the option fee to the seller at any time without further notice or consent from the buyer, and releases escrow agent from any liability for delivery of the option fee to the seller. The option fee will be credited to the seller's price at closing. So there's no paperwork. The title company on its own reconnaissance can sit there and give that option fee to the seller. You cannot stop it, Mr. Buyer. Okay. All right. Let's go to any questions on 5A. All right, great. Let's go to 5B. Termination option. It says for a nominal consideration, the receipt of which seller acknowledges and the buyer's agreement to pay option fee within the time required, seller grants the buyer unrestricted right to terminate the contract by giving notice of termination to the seller within blank days after the effective date of the contract, which is called the option period. The unrestricted right, meaning that, hey, look, if we executed on this, day 0 is the day of execution. The next day is day 1. If we had put 7 days here, right? And to, oh, Lord, it's 77,000 days. 77, I don't even know what that is. Y'all know what I'm trying to do. 7 days. So if you did that, it's straight days. And it also says that on that 7th day, the option ends at 5 p.m. Now, let's go being practical about this. This has nothing to do with agent taking a day off. You forgot about the time. Whatever, right? I have seen where people have played down to the wire with this 5 p.m. deadline on the last day that the option period would end. And I want you to approach this deadline as something you do not want to play with. It could be negligence on your part. If the buyer indicated they wanted to terminate and you failed to do so in a timely manner, you could be held liable for that earnest money, for that $2,000. I don't play with it. Typically, when I write an offer, I also have my buyer sign a termination. I keep it in the hip pocket, just because if we get down to the last couple of minutes of that 5 p.m., I don't want to have to chase a buyer for their signatures. I want to make sure that we protect that earnest money. And if we don't have resolution of whatever's going on at that time period for the option period, and we don't have an agreement and my buyer wants to terminate, I do not want to go start searching for the buyer signatures or trying to get them. So I always do that. I've been practicing that ever since I started real estate. I do practice it now, and I suggested everybody else practice it. I sent an offer and a termination, and they're like, why are you saying this? I'm like, I explain it just like that because, hey, I want to protect your money in case you don't get everything you want in this restricted period in the option period. All right. So I do highly suggest that you do that. Okay. There's been times when this has came about and I've had agents tell me later, hey, I should have had this termination signed prior to that. Right. And I'm like, yeah, I try and teach it, try and tell you guys that just to be on the safe side. It's better to have it than not have it. Any questions about that? If the buyer gives the notice of termination within the prescribed time, the option fee will not be refunded. The escrow agent shall release the option fee remaining to the escrow agent to the seller, and any earnest money will be refunded to the buyer. All right, let's go to C. Failure to timely deliver earnest money. If the buyer fails to deliver the earnest money within the time requested, seller may terminate the contract or exercise seller's remedies under paragraph 15 or both by providing notice to the buyer before the buyer's deliverance of earnest money. We've had situations where earnest money was not turned in. Let me go with live situation. Just, I believe this was Kia Caldwell, just sometime last year. And situation where the earnest money was not delivered on time. And all things was good. All things was fine. And then the seller never terminated, never exercised the termination. And maybe almost a week went by. And the earnest money was supposed to be in the 3 days, but a week went by. And then the seller indicated that they wanted to exercise this right to terminate. But before notification to send the seller's notification to terminate, the buyer paid the earnest. If you read here, it says, providing notice to the buyer, which the buyer hadn't gotten notice from seller. And it goes on and says, before buyer delivers earnest money. So even though it was 7 days later, seller wanted to terminate, but didn't send the notice for whatever reason. We can get into the details of that. And then this buyer magically turned in the earnest money. So now, guess what? We're on the contract again. There's no issue. So I say that to tell you guys, if that's what the seller is going to exercise and you're on that side of the listing agent, you need to do it immediately to terminate, because the minute and second the buyer does deliver that earnest money, that seller has lost that right to terminate, even though it's after the 3 days. Please understand that, all right? It's huge. I know it's little small stuff, but it's really huge when you think about it. Okay, questions about that one?
So just to clarify what that means. So that means that if buyer does not submit their earnest money within 3 days,
Right.
the seller can exercise their right to terminate, but they have to send a notice.
Which is the seller's termination.
If they don't, and the buyer gets the option fee money before that notice,
All right, the deal's moving forward. All right, so we've had situations like that. That's the reason I like to break this stuff down so people really understand what it is and what it's not. Let's go to the next one. The next one, what we have the next one there? We have a failure to timely deliver option money. If no dollar amount is stated as option, or if buyer fails to deliver the option within the time required, buyer shall not have the unrestricted right to terminate this contract under paragraph 5. There's a reason why they started off if no dollar amount stated in option, because people tend to believe when you do an amendment and they want to extend the option period, they tend to believe that they can put $0 in there. I would argue that's not the case. If no dollar amount is stated in the option fee, then you don't have an option. If there is a dollar there, you still have to get a dollar to put there, but you have to have some form of nominal consideration to have an option. It's not really a problem when we have this portion of it. I think it becomes a problem when we have the amendments to extend option. Please understand that. That's the way I interpret it. I think that is right. That's the way I would like us to practice. What did you go say?
As a listing agent, can you push back?
What do you mean?
Because as a listing agent and the buyer sends that over with zero.
I
Okay,
mean, I would just come back to the contract and be like, can you read?
Okay.
It says right here, and nobody reads this. What we're doing right now, nobody does, okay? I would just go and say, okay, look, fair to deliver option fee. The contract does state that. So it gives a provision about option. Just because the amendment is on the other page, this provision still is the contract. So
Okay.
that's the reason I would sit there and say, let me educate you.
however, if, flip it now, me being the buyer agent and I do that, the listing agent has their client sign and agree to that amendment, are we good?
I would, no, I think I think it's interest for both parties to have that. Like, the buyer will want a legitimate option to extend. The listing agent will want a legitimate option to extend, depending on the situation.
Right.
Depending on if it's favors the buyer or favors the seller. I think it just depends.
Okay.
Sometimes we extend the option because it favors the seller. And sometimes the buyer wants to extend and make sure they do their due diligence. I just don't see a reason why we would not want a valid option if there is an option.
Playing devil's advocate, so if the listing agent, let's say it's on the seller's side, why would the buyer have to pay an additional fee if the seller's the one who's gonna extend the option?
You could argue that too. I have not seen where the option is paid by the seller. Good question. I don't have an answer for that. But
I mean, that happened to me. The seller was going to extend and they put $1. And I think that's what she's referring to.
I think her point is like, the seller was going to extend. Who pays the dollar? The buyer did. But she's talking about if the seller extended, why didn't the seller pay the dollar? Okay,
Yeah,
so-
why would the buyer have to pay for it?
and I totally, that's maybe a valid talking point. Let's go to Trek Commissioner and we'll talk to him, okay? All right, we'll talk to him. All right, but I can see your point. Seller has the reason to extend. We put a amount in there, $1, $2, $5, whatever. It's in the interest of the seller to extend. Why would the buyer have to pay that? But in the contract, I don't see where they say, okay, the option fee is negotiable between buyer and seller. Unlike lender required repairs and stuff like that, it's really clear. Lender required repairs could be paid by anybody. But in this right here, it's pretty clear that the buyer pays the option fee. Of course, time is of the essence of this paragraph. All right, so we broke down paragraph 5 pretty doggone well. All right, now with 6, what I am going to do, I'm going to cover 6. I think I'm going to cover all the way to, I'm not going to go deep into E, but we're going to cover the portion that we really get the questions about. So please keep in mind, I'm doing this based on questions I receive and things that come about routinely. Title policy. All right, seller shall furnish to buyer at blank expense, a seller's expense or buyer's expense, an owner policy of title insurance, title policy. All right, by blank. And that's where the first time they actually in the contract say title company. In this case, if whoever's paying the title policy, buyer or seller, great. If they're splitting the title, you would check off both, right? And then you could put down in special provisions that, you know, seller and buyer are each paying 50% of the title policy. Okay, so that's come up quite a bit here lately with agents in the office about that. They're splitting it. That's the way you would do it. The other question we get a lot is about will be amended or deleted from the title policy, or is A8 will not be amended. So the way I like to describe this to clients Oh, you guys, we gotta take a pause. Take a 5-minute break. Everybody take a 5-minute break. Scott. Hey, Scott. Good. I'm teaching a class right now. Can I give you a call? Okay. Perfect. Bye. All right, 5 minutes, turn it to 60 seconds. Okay, let's go back. Okay, so what I get a lot with people to try and understand, this is pertaining to the title policy. When you think about I like people to think about this like the title policy and not say policy, we're talking about insurance. And so the insurance is for what? What is the insurance for on a title policy? So if there's anything that comes up in this title transfer act, let's put it like that. It's saying, okay, are we gonna change, remove things to ensure that clear title is given to the buyer? And this right here is saying, okay, will they or will they not be amended to reflect whatever is needed in order to deed this property over to someone else or not? I try and keep it very simple because you can get in all the restricted covenants and things about the deed and discrepancies, but to a client, I try and keep it very simple. And I think that's the simplest form. Now, we could get in the weeds of this, but for the sake of everybody here, I would like for you to explain it just that way. When we get to transferring title, if there's anything that's going to stop this transfer of deed that needs to be changed or deleted, this is where we're addressing that. If that is the case, what it's asking us to say, okay, is the buyer paying for that or the seller? I get these questions all the time from agents, and I'm trying to keep it very simple and short. We're talking about covenants, restrictions, encroachments, and all this other stuff. That's all part of the deed and transfer. But if there's things we got to change, there's things we got to omit, there's things that got to be removed or addressed, seller or buyer is going to pay for it. And in any given time, market driven or the scenario that would guide buyer or seller paying for it. Let's go if they say, okay, both buyer and seller were split in half. You could do the same thing just like we did above and say that cost is going to be split. All right, but if you're representing the buyer, it's probably safe to say that A82 would be the best for the buyer, right? And probably best for the seller to pay for it in the best interest of the buyer. Okay, so I don't want to go much past that because that's where I get the bulk of the questions. If you want to explain it, I would actually explain it just like that. Yes, sir.
There's always a cost. Do you ever explain when they get down to the nitty gritty, your client, buyer or seller, well, how much is it going to cost?
Could be. We wouldn't know. How would you know that? Unless you're the title company and it got whatever's going on.
Is that something we could work with our title reps?
We could. All right. I'll ask Angelique to probably put some figures out there, what she's seen in the past. I don't know.
Can they provide you that little chart? Have you seen them?
I have not.
So a lot of the title companies have like this chart based off of sales price and they'll give you what it looks like for that price.
That's for the policy, but not for the changes she's talking about. If it has to be amended.
Oh,
Yeah, that's for the policy itself. I've seen that. I don't know what it would be for this portion of it. I have no clue. All right. We'll talk about B, the commitment. It says within 20 days after the title company receives the copy of the contract, seller shall furnish to the buyer commitment for the title insurance, which is the commitment. This is where we're not doing, guys. When the commitment comes out, we're not really looking at it. We're not looking at the portion that we really need to look at, which is Schedule C. I tell everyone that once they get the commitment, they need to look at Schedule C, sellers and buyers, because the seller is going to find out what they need to do in order to transfer title, and the buyer is going to find out what the seller needs to do and all this other things. With the title commitment, it's going to check out the property, the asset itself. It's going to check out the buyer and the sellers and see if there's any mitigating circumstances that prevent transfer of title. I just recently bought a property not too long ago that I'm flipping right now. And we started this process. When we started the process, the commitment came out and the commitment found out there was not 9, but 11 siblings involved. The 9 siblings that had been closely associated their whole life did not know they had 2 more siblings. And that came out in the commitment. And that caused the problem. But it came out in the commitment. Papa was Rolling Stone. I don't know what you want to say. But my thing is that we need to take a little bit more time to, hey, let's go read schedules. Let's see what it has, right? If there's things you don't understand in Schedule C, this is the time to pick up the phone and call title and say, hey, can you explain this to me? What does this mean? All right. There's things that I see in there. I don't understand it. Okay. There was some stuff with, who was that? Amanda, just, I think last week, she brought some stuff up and I was like, I do not know what that is. Okay. So we have to call title and have them explain. It's okay. You're in this business. You got to understand that there's not all the, I'm not going to know the answers to everything. And I'm one of those people, I'll tell you when I don't know. All right. So you're going to get to things like that. And when you do, it's okay. It's okay not to know. We will talk about this right here. It says, survey. The survey must be made by a registered professional land survey acceptable to the title company and buyer's lender. That's really critical. It's got to be acceptable to who? The title company and the buyer's lender. So sometimes we get these surveys, they're unreadable, they're old, they're not updated. And when you get things like that, it could be, if you're setting a listing presentation, they pull out the survey and it looks like it's from 1922. You might be like, we probably need to get a survey. And that's the time to have the conversation during the listing presentation. And if they don't have it, which 9 chances out of 10, they don't, I shouldn't say that, probably 50-50. That's probably extreme. About 50% time they do it, 50% times they don't, right? Then you should start looking at trying to get it. And if you can't get it for whatever reason, by the time you put it on the contract market, then kind of expect some things for the seller to maybe pay it. Now, the question comes up a lot of times because they're saying who needs it, title company and the buyer's lender, right? And you're going to have people argue that if the buyer's lender needed, the buyer need to pay for it. Ever been in situations like that? I've been in situations where we got pushback from the seller. No, that's a buyer thing, right? Correct. Here's where we go with that one. But don't be surprised if you see that. And just like Alex said, hey, Mr. Seller, do you want to sell it or not? So keep that in mind. All right. It says within blank days after the effective date of the contract, seller shall furnish the buyer and the title company seller's existing survey of the property and the residential real property. Buyer shall obtain a new survey at the seller's expense no later than 3 days prior to the closing if the seller fails to furnish within the time prescribed. Both the
Existing survey and to affidavit or declaration. If the title company or buyer's lender does not accept the existing survey or the affidavit or declaration, buyer shall obtain a new survey at seller or buyer's expense no later than 3 days prior to closing date.
Okay, now with this, typically what I put in here for me, I'm putting 3 days, right? Because either you got it or you don't have it, right? Sell disclosure, right? In my opinion, and I've seen people put 10 days, stuff like that, right? But it goes on and says, okay, if they don't have it, this is what happens when they don't have it, right? Or they don't furnish the T47.1 declaration, right? It's telling you if that's the case, now here's what happens. A new one is ordered and produced no later than 3 days prior to closing. And now who's going to pay for that? It also says if lender don't accept it or title don't accept it. It's got all that stuff in there. The second one says within blank days after the effective date of the contract, buyer may obtain a new survey at buyer's expense. If your buyer's the one's going to pay for it, that's number 2. You would just check that one off and that's how it would go. And then number 3 says after blank days of the effective date of the contract, seller at seller expense shall furnish a new survey. All right, now there's lenders in town that require a new survey. I know GCU is one of them. So if you got a buyer and they're pre-approved by GCU, you might just want to check number 3. You might just want to start off with number 3. So you just get it out the way if you know that's the case. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. You know how some surveys have the copyright? Do you express that as a listing agent to your seller? Potentially the title company or lenders may not accept it because of the copyright, can't use it again? Or you just wait till that happens?
I typically wait till that happens.
Okay, so
All right.
don't push.
The class I went to 2 years back, I think we talked about this once before. Other places, that's a huge thing. You go to Dallas, you go to Austin, and it's automatic that they get a new survey because of the copyright infringements for the survey.
Let title be the responsible one to
Correct.
point that out.
Any questions from anyone else? Let's go into objections, and this is probably the last one. It says buyer may object in writing to defects, exceptions, or encumbrances to title disclosed on the survey other than item 6A1 through 7. Above, we was up there talking about those. Disclosed in the commitment other than 6A1 through 9 above, or which prohibits the following use or activity. This says buyer may object the early of the closing date or blank days after the buyer receives the commitment. So after this commitment comes back, they have blank amount of days. My typical traditional type of contract, I put 7 days. If your buyer found out they couldn't do X, if your buyer found out they could not park their semi trailer in front of the street, if they found out they couldn't raise chickens in the backyard, you see where I'm going with this? That's how I ask the question to my buyer. If you found out that you couldn't do X and you would want to get out of this contract because you couldn't Airbnb the house, okay? Because there's areas in town where you can't do Airbnb. And if the buyers was planning on doing Airbnb and they found out in the covenants, when the title commitment comes out with the covenants and all this other stuff, that Airbnbs are not allowed, then you would put Airbnb in that activity, okay? So to simply put, hey, Mr. Buyer, if you found out you couldn't do this, would cause you not to buy this property. That's what we put in there.
Would you put Airbnb or would you put short-term?
Short-term rental. Yeah.
Residential use?
I understand why you asked the question. It's implied this is a residential contract, but people still put residential use. I think that's just a norm. I'm not saying it's right. No, I don't. It's okay. It doesn't take away anything that we're doing. Any questions about that one? Okay, I think I'm gonna jump to paragraph 7 here. The bulk of this takes time to read. Let's jump to paragraph 7. Access, inspections, and utilities. Here we go. It says seller shall permit buyer and buyer agents access to the property at reasonable times. What you think is a reasonable time, Alex? 8 in the morning. And how late do you think is reasonable? I think you're correct. 8 to 8 is probably reasonable, all right? 8 is really pushing it. We would probably want to do things between 8 and 8, okay? Now let's go to the next one. It says buyer may have the property inspected by inspectors selected by the buyer and licensed by TREC or otherwise permitted by law to make inspections. All right, so that means what? Can't be your Tio, can't be Pookie them, can't be. You gotta have somebody licensed, correct? Any hydrostatic testing may be separately authorized by the seller in writing. Seller at seller's expense shall immediately cause existing utilities to be turned on and shall keep the utilities on during the time of the contract is in effect. They did not say the closing date. They said while the contract is in effect. So if you extend the closing date, that means the contract is still in effect. Mr. Seller, we're closing today on Friday. but the contract got extended to Monday. By that paragraph, the seller is still obligated by the contract to keep the utilities on till Monday, right? So explain that to your sellers, make sure they understand it. Now, I got buyers that's closing on Monday, but I had them turn the utilities on their name yesterday, on Thursday, okay? Just to be on the safe side, all right? Because we don't want no problems, right? Now, that's just me, how I operate, and I'm pretty sure we got the clear close, we're good to go, and we did the walkthrough. During the walkthrough, guess what I did? I said, okay, hey, Mr. Buyer, you probably want to get these utilities turned on ASAP. And guess what he's doing? He's turning on ASAP, right? Even though we're going to Monday. Yes, sir.
Questions, both buyers and sellers. In the event that an inspection is scheduled and there is one or all utilities missing, sellers are liable.
It doesn't,
Pay for the re-inspection because of what the contract says.
it doesn't say that in this contract.
But would it be liable? Because the contract says that it has to be on, and they're the ones that own the property.
Doesn't say that in this contract. We could imply that. We could probably press that. We could probably go hard on that. We could probably do everything we possibly can to make sure that is something. But there's nowhere saying, other than the fact they have to get them turned on, there's nothing in there for that.
This is where the option period comes in again.
Correct?
And then most cities and counties do offer those emergencies to turn them on for a limited amount of time, but you have to call.
But to your point, when you sit there and say they have to pay for the reinspection, they have to get them on, cost them beyond, but anything about paying for the reinspection, no. Now, have I gotten reinspections paid for by sellers? Yeah, it's just how you negotiate, right?
Some people are like, oh, well, I don't live here anymore. And then you're like, hey, schedule the inspection. Let's say you're representing the buyer. Oh, yeah, go ahead and schedule it. And then they're like, oops, there's no gas. Oops, there's no water.
Yeah, and that's where communications got to come in play. We got to make sure we're talking and stuff like that. Early on in my
No, whatever.
early on in my career, that happened to me. It's never happened to me later on because it's just communication. It's just getting out in front of it and talking. Hey, man, look, you need to get the utilities turned back on. You need to figure it out. You need to figure out what you go do with your seller, and you need to do that. Okay. So I think it's just one of those things that we just got to stay out in front of it and talk about it. But there's nothing in that contract saying that. Let's keep on going. It says here, it says seller's disclosure. Let's talk about this one. Just had a conversation with some people about this. I think it was the TCs the other day. It says seller's disclosure. Notice pursuant to this property code says check only one box. You cannot have a couple of boxes checked. You can only check one. That is a key statement. Check only one box. The first option says buyer has received notice. If you check this box, your buyer has received the seller's disclosure. If you check number two, that means the buyer has not received it. And within blank days after the effective date of the contract, seller needs to deliver it. It also says if the buyer does not receive the notice, buyer may terminate the contract at any time prior to closing and the earnest money refunded to the buyer. If seller delivers the notice, buyer may terminate the contract for any reason within 7 days after buyer receives it prior to closing, whichever first occurs, and the earnest money will be delivered. Now, remember, it says check only one, okay? I'm gonna go back to COVID, where people was thinking that this was a automatic option to get this 7-day option period. They were waiving, not giving option money up there in block 5 and saying 0 for option period or no option whatsoever. And they were checking this box saying that this was going to give them the automatic 7 days. They were using this thing absolutely wrong. It's the reason it says only check one, right? Now, as a listing agent, if you got it in the MLS or you've given the seller's disclosure to the buyer prior to execution and they have block 2 checked, then you are wrong. Because you need to go back and correct this and say they have received notice. It's really critical as a listing agent that you go back and say, no, you have received notice. And you can't use that one because what it's saying is that they automatically get this 7-day period. And let's say the option period was only 3 days. That would be negligence on your part as a listing agent to allow them to put that in there when you've given them notice. We have had situations like that. We are having situations where listing agents are allowing this buyer has not received notice when they have given notice. And now we're being negligent on that part. So I don't want us to be that way. Now, the reverse of that, if you're the buyer's agent and you haven't received it, and then you say receive noticed, what are you doing? So think about what's happening here, right? Because paragraph 2 there outlines that your buyers got this additional 7 days from the time that they received the notice. If they never received anything and it's required to give a sales disclosure, and you go all the way up to appraisal or whatever, and day before closing, and just say, hey, you never gave me the sales disclosure, you terminate on the seller disclosure clause in paragraph 7B2, and you use that one, you're good to go if they never gave you the sales disclosure. I was talking to an agent and they were really stressed out about not getting the sales disclosure. And I'm like, hey, did you do inspection? Did you do that? Whatever. And I'm like, just don't stress. They were really stressed out and fluttered. And I'm like, no, you're okay. Okay. All right. I understand. And they said the TC, you gotta get it. And they were all fluttered. I'm like, nah, okay. There's exceptions to the rule. All right. So keep that in mind. Next, number 3, it says the seller is not required to furnish the notice under Texas Property Code. And there's a list of reasons why. There's 11 different reasons. And after this, I'll share that with everybody. I got it on a separate document of the reasons of why the sellers are not required. The spouse-to-spouse sale, foreclosures, and things like that. But one of the reasons is not because someone is flipping a property, which comes up a lot. Hey, I'm flipping the property. I ain't got to give a sales disclosure. It doesn't say anything about that, right? And you got a lot of people that's flipping that will check off the third one. If you're representing a buyer and it's a flip and you get that, you're like, oh, that doesn't fall in the category you're required to give one. Any questions about that one? If it falls in the preview of where at least the Texas Property Code says that they are not required to give one. But it says as is they don't have to give it no more. C, the sales disclosure of lead-based paint and lead-based paint hazard is required by federal law of 1978. Okay, and this D, let's go D. Acceptance property as is means that the property condition of the property with any and all defects and without warranty, except for warranties of title and the warranties in this contract. Buyer's agreement to accept the property as is under paragraph 7(1) and 2 does not preclude the buyer from inspecting the property under 7 alpha, from negotiating repairs or treatments in a subsequent amendment, or from terminating the contract under the option period, if any. And it says, okay, only check one. Again, it says again, buyer accept the property as is, or buyer accept the property as is, provide the seller at seller's expense shall complete the following specific repairs and treatments. Okay, let's talk about this one. All right, this one right here just says, look, it's written in there and says, okay, even if you check buyer accept as, you can still do the inspections, you can still have the right to terminate, all that stuff still applies, right? So sometimes you get these buyers, they want to write in there, they want to check block 2 and they want to put pending inspection. All right, it's already in there. So point that out to them so they make sure they know. What else you see in paragraph 2?
Professional, clean, get the home professionally clean.
Correct.
Paint the entire house back to its original color.
Okay.
Like that.
Paint over the logo of the Cowboys in the driveway. All those things are legitimate, right? But pending inspection is not. Okay. Says, do not insert general phrases such as subject to inspections that do not identify specific repairs and treatments. So if you got specific repairs and treatments, yeah, you can put that in there and make that part of the requirement. All right. I went into a house the other day, there was no appliances, right? And while I was standing there, I called the listing agent. The listing agent basically told me that they had a leak in the jacuzzi and that they were going to get the pool tested. So what do you think I put in? 2, test pool for leaks, since he told me, and all appliances, refrigerator, dishwasher, since he said he was gonna put it in there. I put that in there because no appliances was in the house. Okay, so you can use common sense. I want to put common sense, but the whole inspection thing, let's not do that one. All right. Questions about that one? All right, we're right on target. We're going to be done on time. Lender required repairs. It says unless agreed upon in writing, neither party is obligated to pay lender required repairs, which includes treatments for wood destroying insects, termite treatment. If the parties do not agree to pay for lender required repairs or treatments, this contract will be terminated and earnest money will be refunded to the buyer. If cost of lender required repairs and treatments exceed 5% of the sales price, buyer may terminate the contract and earnest money will be refunded. All right, pretty clear. All right, you got the perception that, hey, lender required repairs, sellers got to pay for it. It doesn't say that. As a matter of fact, it says totally opposite.
I have a question on point. What would suffice as proof as the monetary value of the repair?
On lender required repairs, in the appraisal, they come out with a dollar amount next to it. So when they say whatever repair and it's there, then they'll put some dollar amount there. That's one form of evidence for it. But if that amount is not correct or not perceived to be correct, people can go get invoices and say, okay, look, this is what we got. The appraiser quoted something that was wrong, but someone has to initiate that process with the person that's practicing the trade or licensed professional and all those things that apply, and get some type of invoice and say, okay, this is what it really is. That appraiser was wrong in their estimate. I've had that happen to me twice. And since I've been doing this, I went back and get the invoice and say, hey man, look, Mr. Appraiser, you said this much and it's really this much.
So when it comes to that, what would supersede it? Because someone in their circle of friends and family, they might have a company and they might inflate the cost just to get out of it. What would be the worst case scenario?
I think they'd be getting a couple estimates. If it came down and was just so out of whack, and it depending on what side you're on, you know, I would just, okay, it seems inflated. Can we get a couple more, like 2 or 3 more people to go out and do this?
Okay.
And I think that would justify, I don't think you get 3 people to inflate it, especially if they have no influence, you would get some legitimate prices. That's happened to me twice where the appraiser quoted something super low and I was like, I don't think that's a little bit more. And we got some invoices and it's like, yeah, he was like almost off $4,000. Yeah. All right, let's go to F, completion of repairs. Unless otherwise agreed in writing, seller shall complete all agreed repairs and treatments prior to the closing date and obtain any required permits. The repairs and treatments must be performed by persons who are licensed to provide such repairs or treatments, or if no license is required by law, they are commercially engaged in the trade of providing such repairs and treatments. Seller shall provide buyer with copies of documentation from the repairs person showing the scope of work and payment for the work completed, and as seller's expense arrange for the transfer of any transferable warranties with respect to the repairs and treatments to the buyer at closing. If seller fails to complete any agreed repairs and treatments prior to closing, buyer may exercise remedies paragraph 15 and extend the closing up to 5 days if necessary for the seller to complete the repairs and treatments. Repairs don't have to be done till when? Closing. We're saying another one says, hey, they gotta be performed by a licensed professional if it requires a license. And when a license is not required, the person's gotta be commercially engaged in the trade. Okay, so roofer license. Yes. Electrical. Yes. Plumbing. Yes. Structural stuff. Structure. Yes. Okay. Putting the doggone stucco. Nah, no license for that. That's electrical.
Carpet removal. I'm just thinking of.
But commercially engaged in the trade. Now, where we get the problems at is when like the closet is off the track. That's where we start having problems because people are like, well, the license, there's no license, but they're not commercially. Nah, come on, let's do some common sense. Cabinet doors. We've had issues with cabinet doors about who's supposed to fix the cabinet doors. That's been a big one, a couple of different deals. What else is coming at gray area?
Well,
Wait.
the GFCI is because a lot of sellers are like, oh, I can do that.
I know. Yeah, I know. I got you. I didn't make the shit up. Just like, I'm just telling you.
As a listing agent, would you be able to tell them to do it because you know it's gonna come up? Like do it before we put it on the market?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or when, if it has wood paneling, communication.
Say that again?
The fascia, fascia,
If it has exterior wood for the front elevation, let's say it's a farmhouse and all the time.
Would GFCI?
But how many but let's ask this question.
Oh, the GFCIs, like the older homes, the inspector has to note it in the report, but technically, do they need to be done?
The word need is strong because it depends on what type of loans. It is, and then is it need to be done in order to make the deal happen? There's a lot of different things. If I'm selling my house and that's the last thing that's got to be done, and you say GFCI, I'm like, okay, I'm changing that shit. So let's move forward. Let me go to next one. Environmental matters. Buyer is advised that the presence of wetlands, toxic substances, including asbestos and waste or other environmental hazards are or present of the threatened or a threatened, I can't see, or endangered species or
Its habitat.
Thank
may
you.
affect buyer's intended use of the property. If buyer is concerned about these matters, an addendum promulgated by TREC or required by the party should be used.
not much there. Let's go with the last one, home warranties, which is residential service contracts. Buyer may purchase residential service contract from a provider or administrator licensed by Texas Department License of Regulation. If the buyer purchases a residential service contract, seller shall reimburse. And this is where we're putting that amount that seller reimbursed the buyer for this home warranty. Our obligation from our perspective is to inform people what a home warranty is and what it's not, more so than anything else. And hey, there is an option on here for a seller to pay for the home warranty. This is where this goes. The purchase of the residential service contract is optional. Similar coverages may be purchased from various companies authorized to do business with Texas. Now, if you are getting any kickbacks for this, you got to disclose that you're getting a kickback. Okay, you can get the kickback, right? You just have to disclose to your client on the buyer side or the seller side. But you can get kickbacks for this. Huh? So how this works is I've been approached several times. I was approached 2 days ago about a warranty company coming in and servicing our warranties. They would kick back the company for that. Your previous company, they have several different things like with warranties and stuff like that, and in every lenders. So you just have to disclose. That's not uncommon. I think I probably will do it sometime in the future.
There's a form that is
Yeah,
used.
it's called the ABA form. Yeah. So we probably will do it in the future. I just want to get the right company to do it. But if we do it, then we have to disclose. Okay, it's a business. Okay, I think that's it. It's right on 11:30, right on time. Questions? Hope this helps, right? Hope this helps. What?
I thought you were gonna do paragraph 12.
We'll do paragraph 12 later. Yeah, we're on 11:30. All right. I'll do 12 will be the next one, okay? Because we'll probably be here forever. Yeah, we'll do 12 next. We'll do 12 and 21 and 22. All right, for the people still here, and I think Lauren, you're the only one there.
Am I?
Yep.
Everybody else left?
You're the lone stranger.
Hi.
I'm still here.
Who's still here? Linda's here? Okay.
And iPhone.
Whose iPhone?
It says Melinda's iPhone.
Thank you guys for being with us. We will send out the recording to everybody else, okay?
Thank you.
Bye-bye.